Hello, trading is closed on September 15th, 2022. Let's do our disclaimer, go over our calls, and make some predictions. Well, this is my trading plan for tomorrow, Friday, September 16th. Please remember I can be completely wrong. Any trade you make should be at your own risk. Yesterday we said unless we gap down smartly, we should see 39.55.31. We gap down smartly, so no call. Doesn't mean the number won't print. In fact, it did print and there was resistance over it. But although the call was it would print at some time, it wasn't a call it would print tomorrow. When we gap down, undesired direction, everything's killed before the open. And here's what we said, the call's killed. We also said yesterday was the pattern with the early high. Today certainly was. But let me go over that prior to discussing what I think will happen tomorrow. I can't really go over other people's copyrighted stuff. It's just against the law, aside from being unethical, but I can say that many, many years ago, someone else came out with a system for predicting intraday moves, and he copyrighted it. And the problem was things could invert, so it was either path A or path B. And when I looked at this retrospectively, it turned out to be one of the most amazing things I'd ever seen. But when I tried to do it in real time, by the time I figured out whether we'd invert or not, it was usually too late. So it didn't do me too much good. Quite a few years later, someone else figured out that the pattern repeated every 32 days and didn't invert. And I used that for a number of years, and I found it quite helpful. And for most of those 32 days, it's been flawless. But recently, there's been a stretch of a few days where things just didn't work as I thought they would. And either I've been doing it wrong for years, or there's an occasional inversion anyway. Now this is 3 days ending March 19th, 2021, and this is the typical pattern. You start out with an early low, tends to be a rally day, next day's an early low, final day has an early high, tends to be a rally day with a high in the final hour. That's the way it worked for a long time. And when you go ahead 32 days, if there's a weekend, you just go to the next one. It's pretty much the same thing. You have an early high and a high in the final hour. It's supposed to be closed near its high, but it doesn't happen every time. But if you look at the change in trend times, rather than the shape, you'll see it's pretty much the same business. You have an early high and a late high, and that's the way it should go. But once again, starting last year, we didn't have the rally into the high as we usually did. And same thing here. We got the early high, we got the late high, but there wasn't the rally I was expecting. I might still have an early high, I'd still have a late high, but there's no rally. Now this was the pattern we had for a long time, and you'll notice these change in trend times are all pretty much the same. I mean, there'd be an early high and a late high and a rally into the close. That was the standard pattern. But since then, even though I have the late high The early high and the late high just hasn't been the rally into the close. The times weren't too bad. That was the standard pattern. I mean, once again, things seem to be working. But the last few times I get faced with this. I have an early high and a late high, and we tank. There's your early high. I mean, here's a late high. The times are pretty much the same times, but where's the late rally? It just isn't there. And you have an early high. I mean, this just isn't what I was expecting. So either it's inverted on me anyway, or years ago I just mislabeled the pattern. So in any event, 32 days from now, I'm going to look for a pattern similar to this one, rather than what worked for me for a number of years. All right, let's get on to today. Well, MEJT said this drop is false, gives us an optional target 39.54.45 and the required target 39.49.29. Buy signal was given in the afternoon. We didn't go high enough to satisfy it. Gives us a target of overtaking this high, 39.45.13. But these things just haven't been working lately, even though I know they'll work eventually. I still have the volume spike. It doesn't have to pinpoint lows perfectly, but I would expect something by now, even though it doesn't always happen. If you look at sentiment indicators from things like RIDEX index funds, they're at levels compatible with lows, and yet we keep on dropping. I had these nice trend lines. The first time through the trend line, either gaps under it or the trend line wins. But this isn't the first time touching the trend line, and that's a break. You have to confirm it by going down 1 cent. If you don't confirm it once by going down 1 cent under the close, the break doesn't count, but futures are down sharply as I'm recording this, so it shouldn't be too hard to count this as a major trend line break. Well, I had a nice pattern with us ending 5 waves down, but 5 is no longer equal to 1, so if that's the right idea, 5 isn't going to end here. I've been thinking for a long time that we'd end this decline somewhere around 3,700. Let's see what happens to the count if we do. You can't see everything here. But let's set a price low at 3,700. Let's say 3,700 is where wave 5 ends. If that's where it ends, wave 1 is 50% of wave 5, and wave 1 through 3 is 100% of wave 5. So we have wave in balance around my long-standing target of 3,700. Doesn't mean other numbers won't work, but assuming we trade under today's low by 1 cent, that's the next number I can see at this time. Doesn't mean we have to drop tomorrow, but we've broken through a lot of support, assuming we trade under this close by 1 cent. And I don't have anything saying it stops till we hit 3,700. So I'm not certain these higher targets are going to print. Tomorrow's pattern has the early low. We could still gap up. Typically, it's a rally day. If it's weak, more weakness follows in subsequent days. I have higher targets. Unless we gap down smartly, the rules call for them to print, but futures are already down smartly, so it's likely we are going to gap down. My targets almost always print eventually. I get about 2 or 3 failures a year out of 650. But during periods of strong impulsive moves or major changes in trend, they don't always print when I want them to. They don't always print in their preferred time frames. Seem to be experiencing a strong impulsive move. It's one of the times they don't always print right, so I have less faith in the targets printing when they normally do. Today's action broke through major support, killed the idea for a short-term low, which my preferred wave count suggested is quite likely. Sentiment readings are already at major extremes, but these aren't really pinpoint indicators. But in terms of time, we probably aren't too far from a low. But as far as price is concerned, 3,700 area has been my target. At this time, I don't see any reason to change it. None of this specifically says what happens tomorrow. I just don't have a good argument for the decline ending right here. And regardless of what happens tomorrow, I still think 3,700 is likely, and it's a candidate for a low. The last lower target I have over 3,200 is 37.4579. The rate we're going wouldn't surprise me if we saw it by the end of the month, even though it's not a requirement. So tomorrow has the early low, usually a rally day, but if it's weak, more weakness follows, and if it starts early, it's a bad sign. And that's today's call.